I want to turn to another long and eventful life, Mike Daligan's. He's worked widely in the charity and voluntary sector, from grassroots activism to managing or turning around big charities, and had awards for it. His autobiography, though, The Other Side of the Doors, gives us a view of his life and the changing decades since early childhood, when he lost his mother at 5. I love the image you have of a semicircle of doors, and you're sitting outside them, and you know there's interesting stuff going on behind them, but you're outside. That's a very early life image for you, is it? That you're left out of things?
Yes, that image was real. I was I'd left the army. I'd managed to get out. Wow, after 12 years, and I knew on day one this was not for me. And I got into this architect's office, and I thought, well, this is it. Wow. And within 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I was bored. And I thought, and I remember looking up and seeing in front of me this semicircle of doors. And the other side were loads of people, all in bright clothes for some reason, doing all the, it was the early 70s, late 60s, doing all the things I wanted to do. And the doors were locked. And as I say in the book, the door that opened for me was my wife met someone else. We divorced. And what was a disaster was the start of the rest of my life. I've never looked back. And then about a year later, my kids and I were, I got custody, and my kids and I were up in Yorkshire, and I was going back I went back to School of Architecture, and I remember sat at home doing some college work and looking up, and in front of me, or behind me actually, I looked behind, and there were those doors, and I'd got through them. And I suddenly realised that I was trusted. I was in an environment where people expected me to do things that, I was only working in the local community doing, the usual things you did in the 60s, 70s. And the people trusted me and expected, and that trust was all I needed.
Yes, there's a lovely moment in your book when you tell how, when you were working as within the architect's office with a women's refuge that was looking for that, and they said they wouldn't be comfortable having a man along because a lot of these women had been badly abused, and you talked them round, said you were bringing up your own children and you were an okay man, and they accepted you in the end.
They did, yes. I worked there for about a month while I was doing, because we did live projects at Hull, a project that was actually happening, and the information was then passed on to the project for them to make use of in choosing their architect and getting the building they wanted. And I thought, well, I can't do this without knowing what it's like. And it was horrific. It was absolutely awful. But the kids, they just flocked. They saw a different male, and I had a great time there for a month.
You've told in your book the story of your childhood, very much defined by your mother's death when you were 5, and there's a very sort of distressing half-lost memory which you recovered later, you say, in therapy, where about the gathers on a curtain top that bothered you for years.
It was what I called the baleen whale's teeth. And I can remember I used to get that image in my head, and it would always make me feel cold. And I never understood it. And I got to my mid-40s and I thought, this has got to stop, this way of behaving. So I went to a therapist, the lovely Dan Toomey. And I can remember one day I was just sat there, and the language obviously came out, because I remember saying, it's the coffin. And he said, you'll have to explain to me, Mike, I don't know what you're talking about. And I explained that the baleen whale's teeth, these gathers, had always scared me. And I suddenly remembered being taken to see my mum to say goodbye in the coffin, and they were the gathers of the curtaining around the edge of the coffin. And I've never had that image since.
Yeah. So, I mean, in those days, I mean, what happened to you was really not untypical, in that people didn't talk about your mother anymore, and that was it. Everyone said, children get over these things. And you get fostered to two successive families, your aunts and uncles, one better than the other. You're very, very vivid in your memories of the 50s and what everything looked like and what everything felt like as a child.
Drab and grey.
But then enlivened suddenly by things like, I mean, it's interesting, you and Don Black have both written about Saturday morning cinema.
Oh, yes.
That was important to you too, wasn't it, Don?
Oh, the cinema I lived in my whole life was at the Regal in Hackney. It was the cinema during the day and the Hackney Empire at night. But this escapism and film was very important.
Yeah, we come along on Saturday morning greeting everybody with a smile. Yeah, we used to sing.
Yes.
And your dad in the army is this rather distant figure, and as you say, you signed up at 15 in 1957 and served over a decade in the army. I mean, but you say you didn't want to.
No, he came back from abroad. There had been no contact with him for 10 years at all, and then he suddenly turned up and said, "Would you come and live with me?" And I've got a new family, and I thought I was over the moon. It was fairly disastrous, to be honest. And 6 months later, he signed me up in the army at 15. And his sister, the second aunt I lived with, Doreen and Bill, Doreen was lovely. They were my parents, effectively, and Doreen never forgave him for not even asking her whether I could go back and live with them.
And so then you went into the army because that's what your dad did, and that's
what he did.
A lad did.
Yeah.
You say you didn't enjoy it at all. You say you lost the 1960s. Yes. Just when Britain got interesting, yes. You were shut away.
Yes. Well, I say, the world stopped. The world started, and I stopped, and I did for a while.
But you got, as a draftsman, you marked up the war map in the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. You say,
scary.
Yeah.
I can remember the major coming in and saying, make sure it's accurate. And I said, it's always accurate, and he said to me, have you talked to your wife? Your wife's here, isn't she? I said, yeah. He said, have you talked to your wife? I said, not really. He said, if I were you, Daligan, I'd talk to her this evening. And even now, I remember thinking, oh my God. And we did. But what do you say?
It's extraordinary. Does anyone else remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? And I was a teenager at school, and I can remember thinking we might be dead any minute.
I do remember. I remember
that.
I remember staring at the sky a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. But you remember it too, Mike?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah. It's curious that. So you leave the, because it's almost forgotten now. A whole generation's growing up. And imagine, Cuban Missile Crisis mean anything to you at all?
No, I was interested the other day. There was a clip of the two towers, and actually my daughter went, "Oh,
what's that?
What's that?" And so she's 15, and it was like she'd not seen it at the time, and therefore it was still quite. It was with the distance, and whereas for us it's something that happened.
Well, this is why we need long autobiographies. People like Don and indeed from Mike. One of your big. I know you went on with lots of campaigning. Your politics. You were at Greenham, weren't you? Come to think of it.
I did go to Greenham. Yeah.
Greenham. Yeah. And once again accepted among the women.
Yes.
That's nice.
It was wonderful at Greenham. It was just the lovely. Just a lovely time.
I was saying one other thing. You've had all these big successes in charity work and city farms, especially turning around the Leeds one and setting up National Federation of City Farms. But when you talk in the book, you talk about the child Michael in the third person, Michael this and Michael that, and then Mike is who you are now as an adult. Have they finally converged? Are you now the same person as little Michael, or is he still someone rather distant and different?
He's not different. He's still in there. He'll always be there. He'll always be there. He needed looking after, and I do genuinely think that I grew up very quickly at 5 and realised that the world wasn't going to be the way I wanted it to be. So that person came out and started doing the things I've been doing ever since. So, yeah, Michael's looked after. He's all right. He feels quite happy, but he's emotionally still inside.
And does Michael being all right now, being looked after now, does that make you okay as a speaker? Because I know one of the things you've moved towards now is quite a lot of motivational speaking, which is something where you have to stick yourself out there. Absolutely, don't you? The whole of yourself.
Yes, and in fact, that's, if I can say, I think that's my selling point. I'm told I'm unbelievably honest. Well, yes, because if you want other people to learn, then they need to see where you've been and
what you've done
and what you're capable of. And I just think that the world could be a lot different, and it'll be different. So we're saying, when you help kids to get over and help them to be what they can be, the world will change. The world will change.